That sounds fine to me. Hey, what's up YouTube? Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your rear brake pads and rotors on a 2015 Honda Odyssey. Now, I did do a video on this same exact vehicle about 5 years ago of just replacing the pad. We just didn't have the time to get the rotors resurfaced or didn't change out the rotors. I usually change rotors every other brake job. In this case, we did not change them last time, so we're going to change them this time. You can see, if you look at my glove, you can see the reflection. These are very glazed and glossy, and rather than have these machined or resurfaced, the owners just decided to go ahead and replace the rotors along with the pads. Now, the first thing that I like to do is push the caliper piston back in. I'll usually just wedge a small pry bar or a large screwdriver in through this opening and pull that towards you. What that does is push the caliper piston back inside the body of the caliper, giving us enough room for the new thicker pad material and of course the thicker rotor as well. But what we're doing is pushing the brake fluid backwards up into the master cylinder, and so we need to pop the hood and take a look and make sure that we're not going to overflow and make a big mess. As an alternative method, you can also take off this cap here and open up the bleeder screw, and that will expel the old fluid out through this bleeder screw as you push it back in. Whichever way you prefer to do it is fine. It's just that if you are going to open up the bleeder screw, you may have to bleed your brakes when you're done because you're risking the chance of air entering into the system. The way that I'm doing it, you will not have to bleed the brakes once you're done. So let's pop the hood and go take a look and see if we've got enough room in that master cylinder for that additional fluid. All right, this right here, this cap, this is our master cylinder, and you can see that that is right really close to the maximum. So what I'm going to do is open this up and I'm going to take some of the old fluid out. Now we'll dispose of this, of course, and replace it with new clean clear fluid, but that should be enough right there so that we can push the caliper piston back in without overflowing it. All right, now that we know we have enough room in that master cylinder, we can push the caliper piston back in, and I'm just going to grab this little pry bar. This is the Mayhew Dominator. I really like this. Pry that in this little opening or this window here. You can almost just catch the pad right there and then just pull that towards you slowly and steadily. See, now we have a lot more room in there. I'm going to shift the pry bar over in between the inside pad and the rotor. That's pushed all the way back in. All right, now we can loosen and remove these two 12mm Caliper Slide Pin Bolts. And set those aside. And then we can take off the caliper. Now I'm just going to rest this over here out of the way. Make sure that you have it propped so that it's not going to fall and dangle from the brake line. All right, and then we can pull out the old pads. This one, the shim was kind of coming off. And this one, that little noise maker or that little squealer, see how it's kind of shiny? That's because that was scratching on the rotor. That's what was making that noise. That's the squealer's job, is to let you know when the brakes are worn down. Now, because we're taking off the rotor, now we need to take off this caliper bracket. Now, a lot of times my impact won't fit in here to do these caliper bracket bolts, but I just picked up this little low profile impact socket set from Astro Tools. I'm gonna give that a try. Well, we got it loose. Just don't want to get locked in there, but yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool that that shallow socket allows me to fit this Milwaukee 2960 on there now. Got it. Now, these also have a hex drive on the outside. It's basically a 17mm. So you can also use like a 17mm box end ratcheting wrench. That will basically act as like a really low profile socket wrench, which I really like. But now that it's broken loose, we can just zip those off real quick. It's a good idea to have one hand on the bracket while you do this so it doesn't drop to the ground. All right, now for everyone's favorite Honda rotor screws. These are very notorious for stripping out, so I would recommend you get an impact screwdriver like this. This is by Vessel. It's called their Impacta. This is a JIS 3, and that fits in there perfectly. Basically, what you do is you just hit the end of this with a sledgehammer, or Tanya Harding here, and just give it a few whacks, and what that will do is that ratchets counterclockwise, and that will break that loose as you hit it. So let's give that a go. I could already feel it turning, and we got it. That's perfect. Now, a lot of people don't put these screws back in. I usually do, but that's up to you. A lot of people say that this is only there while the vehicle is running down the manufacturing assembly line, and it's only to hold the rotors in place. Now, that may be true, but I usually just put them back in, especially if they come out without any problems. All right, now it also looks like we're gonna get lucky and our rotor is gonna come right off. I do wanna point out though, because this is a parking brake inside, or this is a rotor drum combo, make sure that your parking brake is not on. If it is, you'll have a heck of a time trying to get this off. If this doesn't come off easy, you might just have to give it a few taps with the rotor remover 9000 or mini Tanya Harding. You can also grab a couple bolts that are the same thread as these. I think it's M8 by 1.25, and as you thread those in, it will act as like a force screw or a press against the hub, and it'll help you pop that rotor drum combo right off. In our case, we got lucky, it just came right off. Now this is just your parking brake shoe here, but it's a good idea to take a look and inspect that and make sure that it's not damaged or worn down. This one's okay. It looks like, you know, it's got some wear, but because that's just the parking brake, I mean, they don't usually wear down too much unless somebody accidentally leaves it on and drives around for quite a bit. If that's the case, yeah, they can wear out pretty quick, but this one looks like it's all right. Now we'll get this cleaned up with some brake clean, but I'm also gonna brush this hub right here, just kind of the outside edge or this surface. A lot of times rust will build up here and that will cause the rotor to get stuck. So I'm gonna hit that with a little wire brush, and then we're gonna clean this up and put some anti-seize on there as well. Now I'm just gonna hit this with a little wire brush on a drill. If you're gonna use something like that, make sure you wear some safety glasses, but a regular wire brush will work fine too. All right, now I'm just gonna hit this with some brake cleaner just to try to knock off all this dust and hit the shoes just a little bit as well. You don't wanna spray too much on the shoes because that glue can come undone with that brake cleaner, but a little bit is okay. Now I'm going to brush the surface of this hub with some anti-seize to make sure that our new rotor doesn't get stuck. That should be good. Also just going to clean off the new rotor because those are packed in oil to prevent them from rusting while they're in storage or shipment. I usually just spray a little bit on a paper towel. Don't forget to wipe out the inside of the drum area too, and basically all the friction surfaces. Now down here, this little star wheel, this is your little star wheel adjuster, and that's basically a threaded rod that will push out your parking brake and adjust it and make sure that that's snug on the inside of that drum. As long as your parking brake pedal is nice and solid, you may not have to mess with that. All right, and then we can just do a quick test fit here and see how that's looking. All right, and then we can put the little rotor screw back in. I like to make those snug, but just don't overdo that. Now, if you notice right here, this little hole here in the rotor, that's where we had a rubber plug in the old rotor. So we're gonna take that out and we're gonna put that in when we're done. But before we put that in, I'm gonna tighten this just a little bit. Now, I put that on more as like a test fit, but because we got it on, we've got the hole here so we can adjust this after it's on. And that's what I'm gonna do right now. So that should still spin a few times before it stops. Couple more clicks here. Okay, there we go. I'm feeling better about that. What I did is I just put my screwdriver in through there, basically clicked that star wheel, rotating it, pushing those brake shoes outward a little bit until I could feel a little bit of resistance. Now this still spins pretty easily. You don't want to really have too much dragging on here. Sometimes you don't have to mess with these, but I kind of felt like that was a little too loose. I think this is going to work out fine where I have it now. We just need to transfer the rubber plug out of the old rotor. Well, we just push that one all the way through, and that's all right. Then we can just push this in to the new rotor. There we go. All right, now we can get our caliper bracket ready to go back on. So first we're going to pry out these little metal clips. These are just the little metal abutment clips, and you need to replace these every time because they do wear out. Just take note that this one here with the tab is on this side. Now I'm also going to clean this surface underneath here with a wire brush so that we can make sure that the new clips sit flush, and also I'm going to put some protective grease underneath those clips as well. Just remember to wear some safety glasses if you're going to use a wire wheel. That looks good. Now I'm also going to take out and clean and re-grease the slide pins. So we're just going to pull back on the boot while you pull that out. I usually just do one at a time here. Clean that off. And you know, sometimes I'll put them back in and try to get out some of the additional old grease that was in there. And then I'm going to brush these with this VersaChem synthetic caliper grease. Just a good coating. You don't want to use too much because this stuff does not compress. If you use too much, these will push out and it'll cause your brake pads to drag. So just push that in. Sometimes you have to help it, but the boot will just pop up onto that little shoulder of the slide pin. And then as you push it in, squeeze it, and that will get rid of the air that's in there. And then just make sure that that spins freely and moves in and out just like it should. That looks good. Now let's do the other one. You do need to make sure you're using the correct grease here. The wrong kind of grease or just regular petroleum-based grease can cause these to stick. All right, and then we'll just pop that back in and squeeze that boot. That looks good. Now, one thing I like to do as well is, you see how this is just kind of raw metal? I like to brush that with the same synthetic caliper grease, and that's more of a protectant than a lubricant. That will prevent the rust buildup underneath, which would push those clips up and cause the pads to bind. Now, we don't live in a very rusty area here, so this is not that critical of a step here, but I like to do it because it seems to protect this little area underneath here, and it seems to work pretty well. It just clips into place, and then the other one right here, like so. Now, I don't think it's a bad thing to put a little bit of this caliper grease in these little slides or in these little channels. You don't want too much because brake dust will build up in there, but that thin little coating seems to help keep these pads from binding up. You know, we just don't want them to get stuck in there, and I just think that that little thin coating of grease is going to help. Now this is ready to go back on. Now, before we put the caliper bracket back on, I do like to put a little bit of medium strength Threadlocker on these caliper bracket bolts. And I also wanted to point out, you see right here, if you look carefully, there's these little metal washers. Sometimes these come off when you're taking off the caliper. Well, I can't pull it off, but there's these little washers that go on the inside, and sometimes those will come off while you're taking off the bracket. Just make sure that they don't fall off, or if they do, put them back on just like that. Get those snug. All right, and the torque spec on those caliper bracket bolts is 65 foot-pounds. I'm using here the gear wrench 85062. We'll get those caliper bracket bolts torqued. All right, now before we put the new pads on, we need to kind of take note to the orientation. Now these come with the little noisemaker separate, so I need to clip this onto the pad here, just like that now, so it matches the inside pad that we took off. And then we can go ahead and just put these in. Same with this one here. All right, now on the caliper here, I'm also just going to hit this with a brush real quick, just to knock off some of this dust. That's good enough. Now, the last thing I like to do on the brake pads is put a little bit of this Permatex Silicone Ceramic Extreme. This is the higher temperature stuff. It won't just melt right off like some of the lower temp stuff. This just seems to help dampen some of the vibrations that cause noise and squeaks and squeals with brakes. Just a thin coat is really all you need. Just the parts right here where the brake caliper is going to make contact, and that will help keep it quiet. And then we can put the caliper back on. Just carefully place that over the new pads. You might have to pull in a little bit on the slide pins or line them up. You see this little part that sticks out? We need to line that up and make sure that that is on the flat spot of the little caliper slide pins, like that. And then we can put in our two caliper slide pin bolts. I'm just going to make these snug. And then we're going to torque these to 25 foot-pounds. And you're done. Now, it's very important before you head out, you do need to step on the brake pedal several times, which will push the caliper piston back out, pressing those pads up against the rotor where they need to be. Now, when you do this, don't press the brake pedal all the way to the floor. That can damage the seals in your master cylinder. Just press it down about halfway several times until it feels firm. And of course, you need to make sure that your master cylinder is all topped off at the appropriate level when you're done. And I like to test the parking brake too. That feels nice and tight, so this is good to go. I hope you liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. I'll get a link in the description where you can pick up some of these same parts and tools using the video as well. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.